See you later, buddy.
Oh, there he is. The most famous
look,
bullet.
and we're live too. It's perfect.
Oh, yeah, what's up?
Hey, everybody. What's going on? Arm & Hammer here. You guys know that already because you're on this channel watching me live. Here's the deal. It is currently 7:25 p.m. Not too long ago, we crowned the fittest on earth. Men, women, teams, age groups of all sorts and sizes. Thank you for all your work volunteering this. You're volunteering to get paid.
We get paid.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm still volunteering my time.
Even better.
Yep.
So we crowned the fittest, and guess who it was? I'm going to give you 3 guesses, and I guarantee you're going to get all 3 of them right, because it's the same people that it always is. All right, so for real though, T. Claire Toomey, probably one of the most dominant performances we've ever seen at the CrossFit Games. Could be a couple different reasons for that. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But either way, very dominant performance out of her. CrossFit Mayhem, wowza. They were incredible. They did really, really well. And they kind of showed that you don't need to necessarily have like a super duper team, because they, they're able to put together like a homegrown team plus China, I guess, in a way, right? Because it's mainly the same people with Dre and China thrown in there. The men's competition was, for the first time in 4 years, in doubt, at least for part of Sunday. And it made me think, because I like Matt a lot. I like Noah a lot. I think Matt is a great champion and a good sort of example of what the pinnacle of this sport looks like. I also really like Noah and his energy. I think Noah's a very happy-go-lucky golden retriever of a human being. And his expression of joy while he's competing is unlike anybody else in the CrossFit space. So that's really exciting for me to see. But it got me thinking that I was watching the press conference, and I noticed that these are all the same people. And I wonder about that. It makes me think about that. It makes me think about the fact that this is a sport that has been dominated with dynasties pretty much since the beginning of its modern era. I mean, here's the fact. The last time Rich Froning was not on the podium at the CrossFit Games in some way, shape, or form, the last time was in 2009, which was the final year that the games were held in Aroma, California. Every year since then, Rich Froning has been on the podium. He had 5 years in a row on the individual podium, a second place and then 4 firsts. And then he's had 5 years in a row on the team podium, 4 firsts and a second place thrown in there a couple years ago. And that is strange. Here's what gets stranger. Annie Thorisdottir, 2-time champion, 2 years in a row, 11 and 12. Katrin Davidsdottir, 2-time champion, 2 years in a row, 15 and 16. T. Claire Toomey, 3 times champion, 3 years in a row, 17, 18, 19. And by the way, the years before that, 15, 16, second place. So what is happening? Maybe it's because it's a young sport. Maybe it's because these guys are able to figure out what the answer is to being really good at this thing, and are able to continue that sort of trend. Like they know what buttons to push. They know what knobs to turn. But I don't know. It's a really interesting thing, and I don't dislike it. I mean, it really gives us an idea of how to tell stories in this from like my perspective, right? Because you get to see like, oh, what's the storyline of this situation? But that's just one of the things that's running through my head right now. Another thing that's running through my head right now, Alexander Hitch, only a few athletes can train so hard and professionals to make enough money. That's a great point. I think that's less of a concern now than it was before. I think in the modern era, it was a lot of athletes who have like secondary income, either from gyms or sponsorships or something. I think you'd be surprised at how many people can make a decent living just being CrossFit Games athletes, just with like their social media followings and their programming and their gym or whatever. But you're right. There's definitely a professionalism. There's momentum that gets added to the world of CrossFit as a competitive sport once you win. The other thing that's kind of stuck in my head here on this final day of the 2019 CrossFit Games is that I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think that this is a really cool format. The programming needs a touch-up. I don't think I'm the only one that felt this way. The programming definitely needs a touch-up. It just felt a little stale this year, and I was really disappointed. Might not be the right word, but disappointed is the word I'm going to use here. I was really disappointed that CrossFit HQ cut to 10 as quickly as they did, and from there they just sort of did like boring and shitty workouts with them. I don't know what that was all about. That was a little strange to me. I always felt like one of the cool things, one of the selling points of having 10, cutting to 10, was that like, oh, look at all the cool things we can do with 10. But that wasn't really what we got. We didn't get look at all the cool things we can do with 10. It was like, we got you to 10. You're going to do 135 pound overhead squats. And that was a little annoying for me. I thought that they could have been a lot more creative with those events. Let's see. Katrin is still my favorite from Army Dog. Any interview with her soon? That's a really good question. I think I'm scheduled to have an interview with her tomorrow, sometime tomorrow afternoon. She has a book signing tomorrow evening here in Madison, and I think I'm scheduled to go hang with her a little bit before that. So if I can, that would be awesome. I'm planning on definitely taking her up on that. So yeah, the programming I think needs to be a little touched up, but I felt like the eliminations were a great idea. It added like an excitement and a story to every single workout that just hasn't been there in the past. However, in reality, guys, there isn't a big difference between 10th place and 20th place at the CrossFit Games when you're like halfway through the games. So the biggest change that I would make, the biggest change that I think needs to happen at the games is, if they're going to continue this format, they need to continue tweaking when the cuts happen. So what I would say is, like, for example, you cut down the same thing they did on Thursday, same thing they did on Friday. You can end up with your top 20 going into Saturday. But what you do is you hype up Saturday. You guys made it to the weekend. You're the 20 fittest CrossFitters on the planet. What is up? Check it out. You guys are going to do like 4 events today, and at the end of the day we're going to cut to 10, and we're going to make a big deal about it. We're going to line everybody up, we're going to call out the 10, and then we're going to like get out there with scissors and cut the bottom 10s, like the athlete bands off. And like, you can make a really big story and some like shenanigans out of, you know, making things work that way, right? And I think that's what was kind of missing from Saturday. Like, the last cut to 10 happened so quickly that the air was let out of the room, and everyone I talked to was upset about it. Now, here's the deal. I never thought I was going to say this. No, I'm just kidding. Like many other things, I agree with Dave Castro on this particular point, which is, it seemed like people weren't complaining about the cuts until their favorite athletes got cut. And I understand that, because it's really heartbreaking to see your favorite athletes get cut, but that's not what this is about, right? So there's definitely an aspect of that going on. Let's see if there's anybody got any questions. Who's programming, Castro or Glassman? So that's a really good question, Tim Gobey. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Dave Castro was responsible for nearly 100% of the programming this year. And I say nearly 100% because I know for a fact, you guys remember that very first event? It was running, it was legless rope climbs, it was the snatches. I know for a fact that the legless rope climbs portion of that workout was added by Greg Glassman. And he actually, I spoke with him, and he apologized for that, because he apologized because he thought that it was going to be the right number, but he felt like it was a little too. Thank you, I appreciate that. They're saying good work. Thanks, guys. He felt like 3 was going to be the right number, and seeing everyone tied was a little heartbreaking for him, is what he said. So That is what I know about the programming. My understanding is that Greg Glassman did not have a hand in the actual programming outside of that specific workout. That said, he doesn't necessarily need to have a hand in the program to influence the programming. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say, for example, Greg Glassman asked Dave to do more with less, right? Hey, here's a smaller budget than what you were working with last time, or here's less time in the week. And that's exactly what we've seen. One of the things that Greg made clear to me one of the first times I spoke with him back in September was that he wanted each day at the CrossFit Games to take less time. He was like, I don't want to be there until 8 or 9 p.m. We can figure this stuff out by like 4 or 5 or 6 p.m. And that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen that the days at the CrossFit Games this year have actually ended much earlier than usual, which is why we only had 12 scored event versus like 15 in the past. And so that's one way that Greg Glassman can absolutely very heavily influence the programming without necessarily saying, okay, this is the workout that I want you to do. And I'm sure that sort of thing happened because many of the changes that we saw at the CrossFit Games season in general were because Greg Glassman wanted to change things. So let's see, is there any other questions? Do I think this would have been the podium? Do I think the podium would have been the same without the cuts from Cento 27? Number one across the board would not have changed. Number 2 and 3 probably would have changed, but not by much. Number like 5 through 10 would have been a little, I'd say number 4 through 7 or 4 through 8 would have been a little different. 9 and 10 probably would have been completely different. If the cuts were handled differently, the bottom 3 in each division probably would have been completely different. Did some of the big names take the first few workouts for granted because of the bigger field? Potentially. I have a hard time thinking any of those bigger names that are like veterans of this sport are taking any of the workouts for granted because they know how dramatically things can change and how quickly things can go against them. And because of that, I again, Castro kind of said it in a more aggressive way, like maybe they should be better prepared next time or whatever. Part of me feels that way, but another part of me is like, I mentioned this stat last night. There have been, the vast majority of games since 2012, the first 3 of 6 events have been running events, which is totally normal. However, this is the first year since 2012, 2013, where one of the first 6 events was not a strength-based event. And that made a big difference. That made a really big difference. Let's see. Do I think Will Morad should have retired if he was injured? Absolutely not. This is a cutthroat sport. Will earned 10th place. He worked his ass off to get to 10th place. And because of that, he should have done exactly what he did. And I actually spoke with him. Fuck it. Go out there and do what you can. Don't get injured more. And cash your checks, dude. Because 10th place is going to earn him a lot of money. There's no reason for him to go out there unless he's like paralyzed and he can't do anything. But he participated in a few of the workouts. He's just limited. There's no reason for him not to do that. Did I sell any sneaky fit swag? I did not. But I'll start again maybe next week or the end of this coming week. I don't know. Did some of the controversies like the Fraser penalty or the sprint penalties affect the outcome? I think they did. I think the Fraser penalty probably made it closer than it would have been, but not by much. I think the sprint penalties made a difference as to who made the top 10. Like, for example, Brooke Wells' sprint penalty is the reason why Katrin made it into the top 10. Patrick Vellner's sprint penalty is one of the reasons why he didn't make it into the top 10. That sort of thing makes a big difference. But in the end, I don't know how big of a difference it made for who won. Do I think Greg Glassman had Castro intentionally programmed like main site or things that can easily be done in a box? That's a really good question. And that is one of the things that like intuitively you feel about the CrossFit Games. Sometimes you like look at the programming and it just feels a little bit different. That's one of the biggest differences that I noticed about the games this year, that each of the workouts seem to be something that I could recreate. You know what I mean? I could just do that in my garage or I could do that in my gym. And there's something to be said about that. Like potentially there could have been some pressure put on Dave to put workouts out like that. But like I said, the thing that disappointed me the most about the programming is that we got to the 10 super quickly and then did not do anything exciting with them. We just kind of had them do bland stuff, The pegboard, double under, dumbbell workout was pretty cool, but the rest of it was like whatever. I don't know. Do I think any sanctionals, the Richard 711 says, do I think any sanctionals will take over the games as a premier CrossFit event in the future? I know you're talking about Rogue. I think it's absolutely possible. Because, and here's why I say that. There are many sports in the world that work with, circuits like this, right? And in those sports, there's like the world championship, but then there's within the circuits a tier system. And I think it's entirely possible, and in fact, very likely, that down the line, we see that sort of tier system enter the CrossFit world. And there's a good reason for that, because once you have something like that, you professionalize the sport in a much more meaningful way. Athletes can make their money outside of the world championships. There's viewership outside of the world championships. There's money in prizes. There's money in sponsorships, etc., etc. And I think, what about Dubai? Nestor Corvera. Dubai is an interesting event. I don't think Dubai will single-handedly take over the CrossFit Games. I think what you're going to end up seeing is more than likely a series of 5 to 8 events are gonna overtake the games as like a circuit, right? You're going to see someone come out and say, we're going to offer $500,000 to the person that does the best in our 7 events or something like that. So that's what I think is more likely. Let's see. Do I have Sneaky Fit women's tanks? Very soon. I promise. Very soon. Let's see. Any other questions? Can I explain what happened to Brooke? Yeah, Brooke had got a 10-second penalty, which is basically getting DQ'd. It's like equivalent to getting DQ'd. Trevor V. Was I surprised with Haley Adams? No. I was absolutely not surprised with Haley Adams. I actually got a chance to hang out with her just right now, like right before I walked out. I just walked over to where Mayhem is camping to say hi to Senior and to Chris and Heidi Hinshaw. And I got a chance to talk to Haley very briefly. And I'll tell you guys what I told her. I told her that I was very impressed with her poise and her composure. I told her that there was definitely moments where I could see she was getting on the verge of being frustrated, and she was able to sort of keep an even keel in those moments. And as a young competitor with the spotlight on her the way she did, I thought that was very impressive. I also think that she's not going to have any more opportunities to have a year like that again, because she's no longer going to be an underdog. She's not going to fly under the radar at all. She's going to have a spotlight on her. And so it's going to be even harder coming into the future for her to stay poised like that because of that spotlight. Let's see. What was my favorite? Hannah Kiowski wants to know, what was my favorite moment, competition or otherwise, this weekend? I had a lot of favorite moments, and every single one of them had to do with people in the crowd, spectators saying hello and thanking me and telling me how much they love the content. That means a lot to me. Honestly, guys, like I said when I first started this channel, you can go back to the very first episode that I did, the very first video I ever put up on this channel. The driving sort of mission statement of what I'm trying to do is participate in and move forward every conversation involved in the CrossFit space. I think there's so many people who are, having all these conversations, and I think it's really cool that I get to be a part of them. And as long as, I'm moving the conversation forward and participating in it in a really positive way, I'm pumped that I'm able to do that. So every one of my favorite moments had to do with meeting everybody. What do I think happened to Sarah? Sarah has had a phenomenal season. And the only things that I can think of that would lead to her having such a poor performance here at the games is some sort of an injury, some sort of a mental break, in terms of like not really having it, the fire inside, right? It's very different training for the CrossFit Games than it is training for any other event. No matter how hard you're training for those sanctionals, it's just very different. And I think because of that, there's potentially she maybe just wasn't as sharp mentally as she needed to be. which I think is a bummer because she's very, very talented and very impressive. She still has the capacity to win the CrossFit Games. I just don't know if she believes it right now. If she had any sort of training issues, I haven't heard them. But Mark Bellafleur, what do I think of toes to rings? Come on, it's the CrossFit Games. That's a really good question. And that's a really good observation. It is the CrossFit Games, and they did toes to rings. I've been doing CrossFit for 11 years, and I've done toes to rings like maybe 5 times because they're not the most common movement. They don't show up in a lot of things, and they're easier than toes to bar. So I'm not 100% sure. I think it was new. I don't know. Any thoughts on Castro ducking the diversity question by Ice Cold Vodka 2? Yeah, I think it was a really silly question. I thought the question was out of nowhere. I mean, he absolutely was within his rights to not answer that thing. It's just like, it just came out of nowhere, I think. How would I rank this games compared to the last 5 or so years from a spectator's point of view? I thought the first 2 or 3 days were incredibly exciting because athletes were getting cut left and right, and every event was very important. I thought after it got to 10, it really lost a lot of steam, both from the spectators and from the programming perspectives. The Buttery Bros had an episode where her coach said he doesn't believe in tapering? What? That's news to me, I guess. Should they not have corrected points after announcing the cut like Willie George? Oh, that's a good question. I feel for Willie in this situation. I spoke with him again very briefly. I'm excited to see him come back next season, but I don't think... I think they handled that the appropriate way. I think the problem wasn't that they made the change. The problem was that their system was so slow. It was just so slow to recognize the problem and fix it. And because of that, it just happened that they fixed it after the cuts happened. And that's a bummer. That's a really big bummer. And I hope that he keeps his head high, that he did well, and I hope that CrossFit learns from their mistake in like trying to figure out how to fix these things. And all the judging corrections that they make seem to be pretty arbitrary. They're just doing their best, and I think they just need to learn from those mistakes. Garrett Hampton, do I think they cut too fast? I think they cut 20 to 10 too fast. I think they should have kept the 20 through Saturday and made a big deal about cutting to 10. Is Matt's accomplishment any greater than Rich's considering the cuts and changes? Casey Hohensi. Greater than? I mean, 4 and 4. Realistically speaking, Matt's competition has probably been fitter, but it's hard to compare because they're kind of apples to apples. The second thing that makes it really hard to compare is that Rich has been dominant for 10 years. 10 plus years at this point. So, it's just different. Charlie Bergstrom. What do I think they do differently in Cookeville to create and support the champs? There's a momentum involved in that, right? You get one person with that type of mindset, and suddenly everybody is lifted up by that mindset. I think that's what that is. I absolutely think that there's something special going on in Cookeville, but I think it's more about the people and the attitude and the mindset that Rich has brought to that place, and the fact that he attracts like-minded people, and when people get there and they realize it's not for them, they leave. So the sort of like average stays really, really high. What was the motivation behind this new qualifying cuts and points format? Do you think it was mission accomplished? The motivation was that Greg Glassman was sick and tired of the old version of the CrossFit Games, that regionals were way too expensive and bringing in no money, that CrossFit was losing money on the production of the CrossFit Games, which includes all the money that they were bringing in from the live broadcasts and stuff, and that he wanted to, create, hey, you've had your chance to make this work and it doesn't work, and now we're going to make a version that does work. And I think they did get what they wanted to get out of it. Greg wanted more of an international field, and he got 114 countries versus like 30-something countries. Greg wanted, a shorter days at the CrossFit Games. He got shorter days. He wanted to have outside media and outside venues and outside personalities help cover the CrossFit Games. That's exactly what he got, and I think it was very, 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 very successful for them in that perspective. Let's see. Why are people always afraid to say that Matt is better than Rich? Well, the question wasn't whether Matt's a better CrossFitter than Rich. The question was what about their accomplishments is comparable. And it's like different eras. I think Rich is still the greatest CrossFitter of all time, but I'm also the guy who has a poster of Miko Salo in my office. So maybe I have a different perspective on things than you might. With 30 sanctionals, do I think they should do away with open qualifying? No. Dill Sharp, that's a good question. I like where your head's at, but I don't think they should do away with open qualifying because here's the deal: they're going to be cutting athletes anyway. So if they're going to cut athletes, just bring in as many as you want. If the first cut is going to take you to 75, what does it matter if you're cutting 75 athletes versus cutting 175 athletes? Countries had play-by-play analysis. My understanding was 10 languages. That's just a lot. That's a lot. Thoughts about hosting the games outside the U.S. in the future by Stefan Thiringer. I hope I pronounced your last name appropriately. I love the idea. I think the games have been in the States forever. I think it's time to move the games abroad. I would expect to see them in Europe before I saw them in Australia, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the games ended up in Europe at some point. But if they're ending up in Europe, my guess is they're probably going to be organized and run by someone else, as opposed to internally by CrossFit. Did Jacob Hepner surprise me? Not in the slightest. That man is one of the 10 fittest human beings on the planet any day of the week. And for years, I have seen him do the craziest workouts day in and day out. And he is absolutely well deserving of the position that he ended up in. Do I see an end to Matt's dominance by Adolphus Moore? Matt and Tia are going to lose when they want to lose. Simple as that. What is BKG missing to win? If BKG trained with someone at Matt's caliber on a regular basis, he would have a better shot at winning, is what I think I'm going to say to that. But other than that, capacity-wise, you guys would be shocked at how similar 1 through 5 really are. There isn't major differences. I mean, the points difference between them seems really large, but honestly, the margins of victory are very small. And the types of competitive mistakes and successes that end up being a podium run or a first place run come down to execution and capacity as much as anything else. Should the national champs have their own qualifying tournament? See, I've heard 1,000 different suggestions on what to do with the national champions. Every single one of them treats the national champions like a second-class citizen. And that is the exact opposite of what Greg Glassman wants to do with them. He wants the national champions to be on the field of play with the big name athletes and going toe to toe and figuring out if they can work in conjunction with that. What do I think is next for Noah? From Joel Mastis. I think he had a breakthrough year this year. I think Noah's a wonderful, wonderful person and athlete. Here's a story you probably don't know about Noah. And for those of you who've watched this entire time, I appreciate you sitting here watching this with me because now you're getting story time. Noah went out of his way after every cut, especially the first ones, the ones where there was a bunch of national champions, to shake everyone's hands and to thank them for being there and for coming out here and competing with them. That's the type of person Noah is, and he's a sweetheart. I think mentally he competes the best when he's like exuberant and buoyant, and he has such this verve and this zest for CrossFit and competing. And when he can show that off, when he can demonstrate that, that's when he does his best. So yeah, I think he might have had a breakthrough because he might have realized that about himself, and he might actually finally start believing that he could win. Do I think Hunter McIntyre will get into the game in 2020? I think if Hunter wants to make the CrossFit Games next year, he absolutely can. There are 28 different sanction events. Hunter is incredibly fit, and he doesn't CrossFit outside of like the times that he needs to CrossFit for competitions like this. So if he wanted to, he could definitely go out there and get a spot out of the sanction. How do I feel about Drake possibly going individual? I think Drake could hold his own as an individual. I don't think he would be a contender for the title, not yet. But I think he absolutely could, hold his own as an individual. Who do I think will sponsor the games once Reebok's contract runs out? Rogue? I don't know. Rogue's basically the de facto sponsor of the CrossFit Games anyway, and they've won. Like, they've won the branding battle. I don't think we're going to see any sort of company come in and demand an exclusive sponsorship the way Reebok did. I don't think CrossFit would sign that, but I think they would sign a deal with like fucking Porsche or with like Mercedes-Benz or Ford or something like that. Greg Stevens, 67 days until the Open. Yeah, guys, if you're not training for the Open yet, you better get going, because the Open starts on October 10th. Get it going, folks. Get it going. What was the benefit of athletes doing the Open if they already qualified before it? That's a really good question, David Blankenship. The Open was used to rank the seeding of the athletes going into the first event. So the athletes that did better in the Open did the first event later, and therefore had a better idea of what scores they needed to beat. All right, last couple questions, folks. What are the games missing to make more money? It seems like they're struggling financially but have a huge fan base. Esteban Martinez. The reason why the games were losing so much money is because they were spending so much money. So they were making a fuck ton of money, but they were spending so much of it away, so they just weren't in the black. The real thing that they're missing, the real question that they should be asking themselves is, without a mainstream media partnership, how do they break out of just the existing fan base? Do they grow the existing fan base and therefore grow the people who care about CrossFit? Or do they find a way to reach out to an outside fan base that doesn't already know and care about CrossFit? That's the big question they need to answer. What question to answer? If Kara comes back next year, does she make top 10? For sure. I am not betting against Kara Saunders. I'm not betting against her. She's a monster. She's absolutely one of the fittest people who's ever lived on the face of this planet. It's insane. Kyle Airy, do I miss Bowie? You're damn right I miss Bowie. Let's see. What is Amanda missing? Experience. God, she was one of the athletes that I was really excited to watch this year, actually. And I was really pumped to see her do as well as she did. She had such a fantastic Open performance, and she was able to translate that exceptionally well to the CrossFit Games. So I'm really proud of her. I was really impressed by her performance for sure. I don't know exactly what it's going to take for her, but I think another couple years, especially at the top, like doing what she's doing, she's gonna be like a perennial top 10 guy. And I'll leave you guys with this, by the way. I haven't gotten a chance to do all the numbers yet, and I'll take a look at it later this weekend, but I will leave you with this. Scott Panchik might just be the single most consistent CrossFit Games athlete in the world. I don't think he's ever placed below the top 6. And he's competed against all the best CrossFitters who've ever lived. It's really, really impressive. So I think Scott Panchik is definitely someone special. And the fact that his younger brother Saxon made it into the top 10 this year was really cool. I can only imagine that was a really cool experience for both of them. So I hope that they enjoyed that. And I wholly expect both Saxon and Spencer to make it back to the games. Janelle Winston, he finished 13th one year. Well, then in that case, screw that guy, right? Thoughts on Ricky Gerard coming back? All right. This is just a secret between you and me, Siobhan. I fucking love it. I think that CrossFit I hope Ricky comes back, and I hope he starts winning sanctionals left and right, I hope he says he's not sorry. I hope he turns into like this big bad guy. That's what would really make this thing exciting for me from like a storyline perspective. You know what I mean? More likely than not, Ricky is probably just going to come back. He's going to win some events. He's going to say he's really sorry. He's going to be like one of the bros again, right? And he's going to be tested a bunch of times. Maybe he'll test positive again. Who fucking knows? But either way, I really, my deep down dark secret desire is to see Ricky come back as like a total heel. And that would be really wild. Oh, David Venegas, apparently now my stats guy, Scott. 11th 2018, 6th 2017, 6th 2016, 6th 2015, 5th 2014, 4th 2013, 4th 2012. Yeah, isn't that crazy? All right, guys. I think that's about it. I'm very tired. It is 8 p.m. The mosquitoes are starting to come out. I can almost smell the cookies in the lobby. I will be hosting more of these little Q&As over the next few days, I think, maybe over the next week or so. Is Haley Adams the next Tia? That's really early to tell. Haley Adams is very young. She needs to develop a strength base, but if I was going to pick someone who'd be the next dominant champion, I would say Haley Adams has the possibility of doing that. Actually, it's a comfort in, not a double tree. Thank you, folks, for all of your support. Honestly, it's been really cool to get a chance to do this for everybody over this past week. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. There's going to be a lot more content coming up. The season is really right around the corner. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's a lot of analysis that needs to be done, and I'm happy to do it. If you like this stuff, please support the channel by subscribing. Maybe in the future, very soon, I'll have other ways for you guys to support me, for me to keep this going. I'm really excited for what the next season has to hold, guys. Honestly, I love getting the chance to do this. I hope you guys can like feel that joy that I get every time I get to talk about this, even with a little bit of a like lower energy level here. But yeah, guys, so subscribe to the channel, and when you guys do get the opportunity, it would mean a lot to me if you guys supported what I got going on here. So thank you so much, folks, and I will see you guys very soon.